Karl Marx. So I think it would be nice for you to start with a little reading from the part we decided on, which shows the world in which Eleanor Marx grew up and the world in which Karl Marx actually sat down to write the books that kind of changed the way humanity looked at itself, or a large part of it looked at itself. So with you can do the reading first, then we'll take it from there.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mala, and you know, as Arnaud said, we have to start with thanks before anything else. So it is really wonderful to be here and very exciting, and particularly that this event is part of your very well-known Kolkata Literary Meet. And thank you very much to the British Council for having me here. Eleanor Marx was born in 1855 in a two-room, a very small two-room apartment, and although that's to dignify it, just two boarding rooms basically in Soho, which is not the fashionable place that it is today in London, and it was a place that was made up of a lot of immigrants, political immigrants from the 1840s revolutions, amongst whom were the Marxes, and because nowhere else in Europe would have Karl Marx, he'd been kicked out of everywhere by this time. And so this is the period in which they're living in two rooms, and the they we're talking about are the three Marx daughters who are the only surviving children. There had been sons, but unfortunately they'd all died. This kind of sort of infiltration produced, which of course is not to recommend it, but Agent Stieber who was presenting himself as a sort of proto-socialist, and had wormed his way into the interests of Marx, was in actual fact hired by Ferdinand von Westphalen, who was the Prussian Minister of the Interior, so the head of the security services, but who also happened to be Jenny von Westphalen, Mrs. Jenny Marx's half-brother, who had been absolutely furious since he found out that his half-sister was marrying this ne'er-do-well terrorist revolutionary, and as a consequence kept the Marxes under surveillance pretty much ever since. So here's the report. Finger-thick dust everywhere, and everything in the greatest disorder. A large, old-fashioned table, and that's the table that Mala referred to, where the family ate and cooked and the children played, and Marx wrote the first volume of Capital. Covered with waxcloth, stands in the middle of the drawing room. On it lie manuscripts, books, newspapers, then the children's toys, bits and pieces from his wife's sewing basket. Next to it a few teacups with broken rims, dirty spoons, knives, forks, candlesticks, ink pot, glasses, Dutch clay pipes, tobacco ash. In a word, all kinds of trash, and everything on one table. A junk dealer would be ashamed of it. When you enter the Marx flat, your sight is dimmed by coal and tobacco smoke, so that you grope around at first as if you were in a cave, until your eyes get used to these fumes. Everything is dirty, everything covered with dust. It is dangerous to sit down. This is what a Prussian agent thinks is dangerous in the 19th century. Are cordially offered a pipe, tobacco, and whatever else there is. A spirited conversation makes up for the domestic defects, and in the end, you become reconciled. Steady on, Agent Stieber. You become reconciled because of the company. Find it interesting, even original. This is the faithful portrait of the family life of the communist leader, Marx.
So, with all this wealth of information, how did you go about writing this? As I said, it's not a portrait as much as a landscape of the life and family and times of Karl Marx. You've given a kind of a context to what all happened around there. So, when you write a biography so rich in material, how do you know when to draw the line? I mean, it's not a portrait, as I said. It's not an unerring gaze at her. It's more about the context that created Eleanor. And, there's enough. You could have done the portrait way as well, because she's done so much. So what made you choose this particular approach to this book?
Somebody didn't hear Arnaud's point about the phone. It's a really suggestive phrase you use, where you draw the line, because the line is in the final edit. And that will tell you that this, what finally ends up as this book, is something that came from a much bigger final manuscript, which before that was a huge monster.
How long did it take you?
Well, too long. But I suppose in total it took about 7 years. I mean, the actual writing, once I had my head down, was probably about 3 years. But there was, I was doing other work. Like Eleanor, I had other stuff on the go. And at various times I had a full-time job, or I was, doing political activism and so on. He kind of came along and, this is very firm. Yeah, this kind of firm thing. And I'm like, no. And that no was not because I wasn't very interested in her, because I'd always known about her, and she'd sort of been part of someone who had been in my life, much as one loves a great writer or political thinker or philosopher. But I'm like, I want to take on the Marxes. Because if I'm going to do one Marx, that means I'm going to have to, do that. And so the backstory is that I spent a lot of time with her grandparents on both sides of the family, and then, of course, with her family. And then I had to do all the things I didn't want to do. I had to read every biography of Marx and Engels in English, and some and sort of very badly in a few other bits of languages that I can sort of get my head around a little bit. So I had to do it. So there was all of that. But that meant by the time I got to her, I had more of a sense of where she came from, and also what had been left out of the accounts that there had been of her so far. But the other thing I discovered in the process of doing that, and this is part of the joy and excitement of her, is that I realised that we only have Karl Marx because Eleanor Marx wrote up the family history. And in fact, we only have large portions of Engels' life and William Liebknecht.
Sales here have so many interpretations of what he did, how he worked. But there are some very quaint little things about the man, which, at least I didn't know before, about the Hans Rockel toy shop.
Yeah.
And he seems, also there's a sadness about the sons who were lost, and this rather strange. Can you talk about the rather...
People bring you stuff, and is that had she lived, because just think about it, it's 1898, and she's 40, she's 43. If she lived long enough to be in that early period of the early suffragette and the early kind of socialist movement there, she might have come to quite a different place and resolution and maturity about where those things stood in her life.